I wanted to take a few minutes in this episode and explain how to do record keeping the right way. So I figured a good way to do that was to actually show you some visuals. So if you're listening to the podcast, this is also going to be available on YouTube. You might have a better chance of understanding and following along on YouTube. But if you're with me now, let's go ahead and dive into a record keeping workshop. And this would be a good refresher as we get closer to January when we got to start calculating our numbers. Hey, before we get started with the video, I wanted to take a quick time out and tell you how you can download a free OSHA audit checklist. Simply go to my website, Help with OSHA. You can click right there on the homepage and you can download a free OSHA audit checklist. This is the best way to prepare you and your team for an unexpected OSHA inspection. Now, if you haven't already seen it, this is a handout, a packet that OSHA puts out, and I will include this in the show notes so you can actually download this packet. It's for free, it's put out by the government, and it does a really good job of explaining how to go through your annual OSHA log. For those of you who aren't familiar, your OSHA log or your 300 log is a record of all the injuries that have happened throughout the year that are classified as recordable injuries. So it's a good way to go through your OSHA log and know how to organize the paperwork. And really what I want to show you today is kind of break down the best way to organize your paperwork so that this just becomes an automatic process at the end of the year. Now, in the forms for work-related injuries and illnesses, a key term is work-related. One of the biggest mistakes manufacturers make, and just companies in general, is they actually start recording injuries that aren't work-related. And it's not because they're not trying. In fact, they're trying kind of too hard because they want to capture everything. But if somebody collapses on the job and it's a medical condition that's not work-related, that has no business being on the OSHA forms. So right now, I want to break down the three main forms that we're going to be looking at and kind of unpack these forms as we go through it. The first one is the 301 form. So this is just an incident report. This is basically an accident report of what you would fill out if somebody gets hurt on the job. Now, some companies have internal forms, and that's okay, as long as it contains the same information as this form. So this is the form that's included in the packet, and you'll see it starts out, it just goes, right down the list, pretty straightforward. What's the name of the employee that was injured? What's their address, their date of birth, their hire date, male or female? Were they taken to the doctor? What doctor were they taken to? It goes through these series of questions. And when you get over on this side, it talks specifically about the accident. What time did the event happen? What was the employee doing before the accident happened? How did the injury occur? What was the injury? What object directly harmed the employee? If the employee died, when did the death occur? Now, I hope we don't get to that one, but you can see this is all encompassing. This will cover any single incident, any single injury that happens. But when you're filling this out, some of the commonly missed information is stuff that the supervisor just doesn't know. Supervisor might not know where the employee lives. That might be a question for HR. Supervisor might not know when they were hired. That's a question for HR. So some of this is going to need to be tag teamed between the employee supervisor that's filling out the report, and I would encourage you to have the supervisor fill out the report. That way they know exactly what happened. So this is meant to cover whether an employee smashed his finger, slipped, fell down, fell off a ladder, or God forbid there was something more serious like an amputation or an eye injury. This is going to cover all of that. Now, up here, number 10 has case number from the log. So this is where these different sheets talk to each other. So the incident report is going to be captured here, and it's going to be transferred over to the OSHA 300 log. Let me flip the page and I'll show you that one. So this is the OSHA 300 log, and you can see you have cases that go down. And if you're watching with me here on the video, you can see this is all meant to where you can actually type this in either into a fillable PDF format or an Excel sheet, and you can actually fill out the table here completely online and save it to your computer, and that way you kind of have saved some trees and eliminated the paperwork, but it's still going to be captured and maintained on a regular basis. Now, I'm not going to read these word for word, but I do want to hit some of the big ones. So the first one is case numbers. So here under A, you're just going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You could have it more detailed if you wanted, but really that's all you got to do is have what number it is. If you go over this sheet into another sheet, obviously you're going to start at the top with the next sequential number. So employee name, the job title, the date the injury happened. Now this is one of the problems that happens because somebody gets hurt on a Thursday and we go, oh, this was happening, that was happening, we didn't get time. We want to go back and make sure we get this day correct. It's a big deal when it comes to actually calculating lost time or restricted time. So make sure the date of the injury is captured, where it happened, and then what happened. Now, a problem here, this isn't a very big line. It's not very big. So you need to have some really to the point bulleted information here. He was struck by a forklift. He was hand caught in the door. Splashed XYZ chemical in his eye. So very quick, describe what happened. And then over here, this section right here, you're only going to check one of these. So death, days away, job transfer, or other recordable case. Now, if it is an accident where the doctor takes the employee out of work, that's going to be classified as a day away, meaning the doctor said you can't come back to work, you're going to stay home for a few days. That's going to be classified as days away from work. If the doctor says you can go back to work, but I don't want you lifting more than 25 pounds for the next week, that would be a restricted activity. So you're checking this or you're filling in this circle. An other recordable case means it's an injury where the employee did not get pulled out of work and the employee didn't have any restrictions. So that's another recordable case. Now in these boxes, these are going to be zeros unless the doctor recommends it. Common problem that comes up is employees get hurt and then they choose to stay home on their own. That's not a recordable case. The doctor has to make that call, not the employee. So keep that in mind. But doctor takes them out. Let's say doctor takes them out for 3 days, and then after that they're on restriction for 5 days. You'd have a 3 here and a 5 here. And then over in this column, under step 5, you're going to record the type of injury or illness it is. 9 times out of 10, it's just going to be the very first one under injury. Up here at the top, do not forget to type in the date. This log is for the year that you're in right now. It's the year that you're doing it, the year you're filling it out. This log is going to be filled out throughout the year, so we're not just doing it at the end, but throughout the year we're filling this out. We've got the date up here, we've got the establishment name, city, state, everything is filled out. So if you have nothing, if you have no injuries for this year, you still have to complete this log. Let me say that again. If you have no injuries, you still have to complete this log. So all you're going to do is have nothing here, zeros across the bottom here, and this is filled out with the year at the top. Okay? That's best case scenario, no accidents, no injuries. Now, the third form we're going to talk about is actually the 300A form. The 300A form is the summary of work-related injuries that happen throughout the year. Now, this form talks to the other form. So the 300 log has column numbers at the bottom where you're adding up the totals. So let's say I had 2 cases where I had days away from work. One had 2 days away from work, one had 5 days away from work. I'd add that up, it'd be a 7-day total at the bottom. So when it came time to fill out the summary form, I'd want to make sure that I put the totals up here. And then this is the total number of cases. This is the number of days. Okay? Number of cases, number of days. Just take your time reading over it. We don't look at this but once a year, so sometimes we get mixed up or discombobulated, but those numbers mean they're a big deal. We don't want to mix up how many cases we had versus how many days away or restricted time we had. So we're going to include those. Same thing here at the bottom. Like I said, most of the time it's going to be injuries, but if you do have hearing loss or other types of illnesses, you're going to include that. Now, over here, this is the part where people get a little mixed up and they kind of scratch their head and they go, oh, I'm not sure if I did it right. You have to have your NAICS code. You need to have that code. You might also need your SIC code. If you don't know that, you can find it on some legal paperwork, I'm sure, but you can also do some research on the industry you're in. OSHA uses this information to compare you against other companies in your industry. So they want to know how are you stacking up against other companies, and that's why that code is important. We want to make sure we are in the right category to be compared against the right kind of other businesses. Here, we're going to have the annual average number of employees. So per company, we're going to have the average number of employees for the company there. Down here, we're going to have the total hours worked by all employees last year. That is usually taken off the payroll system. Usually that comes off payroll where we say, we had 70 employees or 700 employees, and this is the total number of hours that we worked. The higher this number is, the better the ratio works out. So you want more labor hours because it's going to make, if you have injuries, the injuries aren't going to look as significant. Just kind of explaining how the ratio works there. At the bottom, you're going to sign off. A company executive has to sign off on this. And honestly, all you're doing is you're making sure that nobody has fudged any numbers or messed up in this. So you're always going to double check it. It's a way for the safety manager to go, okay, we're good. Usually the safety manager isn't the one that fills it out. It's usually filled out by their boss or the director. So we want to make sure we got more than one eyeball or eyeballs while looking at this. All right, so we talked about the 3 forms. We got the 301, which is the incident form. We got 300 log, which is the log of injuries and illnesses. And then we got the summary here. At the bottom, you'll see it tells you must post this summary page from February 1st to April 30th in a prominent area for employees to see. This should be public information for your employees. Let's go through a few things. In the packet, there are some helpful sheets that explain common mistakes that happen. One of the most common things is people aren't specific with the injury that happened. So you go, we had 3 people and 3 people smashed their fingers. Well, we need to know exactly which area it happened in, what the employee's name is, and then we're going to make sure we fill out this information correctly. Here, we're only filling out one box at a time. This is where our days go, and this is where we're filling out what type of injury it is, or injury or illness it is. So we just want to make sure the form is filled out correctly. At the bottom, the numbers should add up. It's not hard, but it's an easy detail to overlook. If you happen to have more injuries and you need another page, you want to make sure you've added them up correctly. Common mistake I see all the time is people don't add the totals. They just leave the numbers. We want to actually have the totals added up. All right, some frequently asked questions. So me as a safety coach, I get asked all the time about record keeping. Usually it happens in January, which is totally understandable. but we want to make sure we cover some of the most frequently asked questions. The first one is, what is a recordable injury? Now, in the packet, they actually explain the definition of a recordable injury. And it's not common sense. It's not what you might think it is. A recordable injury means that injury meets the criteria of what OSHA deems a recordable injury. So it's their definition. It's not your definition. It's not your employee's definition. It's their definition. And their definition is essentially anything beyond first aid is considered a recordable injury. So what's first aid? Well, they outline that too. They've given you specific treatments that count as first aid. One of the most common things that's not first aid is if a doctor prescribes medication. If you get a doctor's prescription, ding, 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 it's automatically a recordable injury. Another thing that's not first aid is stitches. If you get stitches at the doctor, ding, 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 recordable injury. If you get an x-ray at the doctor and it comes back and you don't have a broken bone, not a recordable injury. An x-ray is seen as diagnostic. It's like we're checking in, we're making sure, we're basically just looking at the patient. That doesn't mean it's a recordable injury. If it comes back and you do have a broken arm or a broken finger, ding, 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 yeah, it's a recordable injury. So you want to be crystal clear on what that is, and I would highly recommend you keep that nearby so that you understand what the difference is. In the show notes, I'll actually include a link to this to help you identify what is a recordable injury, what's classified as first aid, and what isn't. Second question, what is considered first aid? I already told you, we just went through that. Third question, when do I post the summary? The summary, the 300A form, has to be posted in a prominent location. Typically it's on a bulletin board near the break room or near the time clock. This is going to be from February 1st to April 30th. Can you post it longer? Yeah, you can. But you can't take it down before April 30th, and you can't put it up, late. I guess you can put it up late, but you're a violation at that point. So we want to make sure February 1st to April 30th, we got it posted. The last question, what about temporary employees? Do they count on our OSHA log? Yes, they do, if they are managed and supervised by your employees. So if you have temporary workers that are working for your company and they are, managed by their own supervisors and they're essentially contractors coming in and doing the work, then if they get hurt, their injury and their labor hours and their employee headcount, all that goes on their employer's books, their OSHA books. But if you are hiring temporary employees to come in for 3 months, 4 months until you hire them on full time, or if they're working under your direct supervision, then everything about them counts on your documentation. The number of people count, the number of labor hours count, and if they get hurt, it counts on your OSHA log. So, some most frequently asked questions. If you have any questions about this, I encourage you to dive into that packet that's going to be included in the show notes. It's a great way to get a better understanding. We're trying to get a head start on this. You don't want to wait until January 30th to start working on it. So start looking at your information now, make a plan for this year, and until we talk again, do everything you can to keep the people you work with safe so no one gets hurt at work.